The reality television industry is an incredibly ruthless, highly predatory machine, carefully designed to completely consume young, deeply vulnerable talent. For decades, we have actively witnessed the exact same tragic narrative unfold before our eyes. A massive network discovers a highly gifted child, exploits their raw innocence for unprecedented global television ratings, and then violently discards them the absolute second the initial viral momentum begins to inevitably fade. The heavy, suffocating graveyard of the modern music industry is completely filled with the heavily shattered dreams of forgotten reality show contestants who could never quite escape the massive shadow of their very first television audition. But every once in a while, a truly rare, highly explosive artistic anomaly violently, completely breaks the heavily manufactured mold. When a deeply terrified 13-year-old girl stepped onto a massive stage in 2018, the entire world fundamentally misunderstood exactly what they were witnessing. They thought they were simply watching a cute, nostalgic novelty act, but they were actually looking at the highly explosive genesis of a massive artistic rebellion. This is the incredibly guarded, deeply profound, untold story of a young artist who successfully survived the toxic reality television meat grinder. This is how the quiet schoolgirl you remember completely destroyed her past to build an incredible future. This is the absolute truth about the brand new Courtney Hadwin. Imagine walking onto the biggest television stage in the United Kingdom, completely paralyzed by the crushing weight of severe social anxiety. In the year 2018, a painfully shy 13-year-old girl named Courtney Hadwin did exactly that. When she nervously stood before the notoriously critical judges of Britain's Got Talent, the entire world collectively expected another easily forgettable, highly generic pop audition. She could barely manage to answer basic interview questions, her voice trembling with intense fear. But the absolute second the opening notes of the classic track, Hard to Handle, echoed through the massive auditorium, a terrifying, unprecedented transformation occurred. The timid schoolgirl entirely vanished, violently replaced by an explosive, deeply uninhibited rock and roll hurricane that completely shattered the reality television formula. Her frantic, wildly unpredictable stage movements and incredibly gritty vocal power sent massive shockwaves through the global entertainment industry. That specific audition did not just secure a few million views. It instantly became a massive, undeniable global phenomenon, accumulating hundreds of millions of views across every single digital platform. The internet was completely mesmerized by the shocking juxtaposition of extreme innocence and raw, unbridled rock energy. However, that singular, highly viral television moment, while incredibly spectacular, was actually the absolute beginning of a much darker, incredibly treacherous psychological journey. The massive overnight fame permanently erased her normal childhood, instantly forcing a fragile young teenager to rapidly navigate the notoriously ruthless corporate music machine. The sheer, terrifying magnitude of her initial television performance fundamentally required an equally massive response from the highly influential judging panel. As the final, explosive notes of her audition violently echoed through the stunned auditorium, the heavy, highly manufactured atmosphere of the television show completely evaporated into absolute awe. It was in this incredibly highly charged environment that celebrity judge Amanda Holden made the massive, career-defining decision to slam her hand directly onto the coveted golden buzzer. As the glittering golden confetti rained down heavily upon the violently trembling shoulders of the young teenager, her entire existence was permanently altered. That highly symbolic, incredibly dramatic television gesture instantly catapulted her completely past the grueling preliminary rounds and directly into the massive pressure cooker of the live television semifinals. While the global television network aggressively framed this triumphant moment as a beautiful, perfect fairy tale, it was actually an incredibly dangerous, highly overwhelming escalation. That specific golden buzzer is widely considered one of the most iconic, unforgettable moments in the entire history of the franchise. But it also immediately placed an impossible, suffocating level of expectation heavily onto her young back. She was no longer just a talented child. She was officially a massive global television property, and the immense pressure to constantly recreate that initial viral explosion would become a terrifying, daily psychological battle. In the highly chaotic, deeply overwhelming aftermath of that massive golden buzzer moment, the highly influential television mogul Simon Cowell made a massive public declaration that would deeply haunt her entire early career. He explicitly, loudly compared her incredibly gritty vocal tone and her wildly frantic stage presence to the legendary, highly revered rock icon Janis Joplin. For any developing young musician, being aggressively compared to one of the greatest, most deeply complex vocalists in the entire history of modern music is both an incredible, massive honor and a deeply terrifying, highly restrictive curse. The mainstream media completely ran with this highly marketable narrative, instantly branding the young teenager as the ultimate modern reincarnation of a lost rock legend. While this massive historical comparison initially generated unprecedented global television ratings and massive viral exposure, it rapidly threatened to become a highly suffocating artistic prison. The massive corporate entertainment machine desperately wanted to permanently freeze her in that exact specific moment, aggressively pushing her to essentially become a highly lucrative novelty tribute act. She was deeply forced to carry the massive, heavy ghost of a rock legend on her incredibly fragile shoulders, constantly fighting a completely uphill battle to actively prove to the world that she possessed her own unique, completely original artistic identity, entirely separate from the classic covers she was heavily performing. Having completely conquered the British television landscape, the massive corporate entertainment machine ruthlessly pushed her directly into the highly intimidating, massively competitive American market. She was aggressively recruited to compete on the massive global television spectacle known as America's Got Talent: The Champions. This was an entirely different, incredibly dangerous psychological battlefield. She was no longer competing against amateur acts. She was fiercely going head-to-head with the absolute greatest, most heavily experienced viral sensations from completely across the entire globe. Stepping onto that massive American stage was a critical, highly calculated strategic move, deeply designed to completely introduce her undeniable raw talent to a brand new, highly lucrative international audience. The massive exposure completely succeeded in vastly expanding her deeply dedicated global fanbase far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. However, the grueling reality of heavily competing on yet another massive reality television program began to deeply highlight the intense, severe limitations of the format. While the massive American audience completely fell in love with her incredibly explosive live performances, the constant, draining cycle of high-stakes television competition was completely entirely incompatible with long-term, genuine artistic growth. She was successfully building a massive international following, but she was simultaneously becoming completely exhausted by the relentless, highly manufactured demands of the reality television circus. The absolute, undeniable hallmark of a truly legendary musician is the vital, uncompromising transition from merely performing the brilliant work of others to successfully creating entirely original masterpieces. For Courtney, making this massive, incredibly terrifying leap was the absolute most critical phase of her entire artistic evolution. It is incredibly easy to simply hide behind the proven, universally loved melodies of classic rock legends, but it requires a massive, unimaginable level of sheer vulnerability to expose your own raw, untested lyrics to a highly critical global audience. Recognizing the absolute, terrifying danger of remaining permanently tethered to the nostalgic magic of cover songs, she bravely stepped entirely out of her comfortable, highly celebrated comfort zone. She began fiercely pouring her own authentic teenage experiences, her deepest internal struggles, and her incredibly complex emotions directly into her own original songwriting. This massive, highly intentional shift from being a highly entertaining reality television cover artist to a deeply profound, fully realized singer-songwriter completely revolutionized her entire professional trajectory. When she finally began releasing her own original music, she was no longer just aggressively screaming the historical pain of past generations. She was powerfully, undeniably projecting her own unique voice into the modern atmosphere. This monumental leap solidified her absolute status as a true, permanent fixture in the modern music industry, leaving the Novelty Act label completely in the dust. Following the massive, highly concentrated burst of global exposure from the various talent competitions, the traditional, heavily expected career trajectory dictated that she should constantly remain on television, desperately chasing whatever fleeting mainstream exposure she could possibly secure. However, demonstrating a massive, unprecedented level of strategic brilliance, she completely flipped the script on the entire corporate entertainment establishment. She actively stopped playing the exhausting, highly manipulative game of reality television completely. She fundamentally realized that constantly begging for the fickle approval of television executives was a complete artistic dead end that would eventually drain her of her raw authenticity. Instead, she boldly shifted her entire professional focus away from the highly restrictive confines of traditional broadcast media, deliberately choosing to invest her massive energy entirely into building a genuine, highly sustainable music career. By intentionally decreasing her mainstream television exposure, she completely took back the absolute power over her own narrative. She was no longer a highly edited, heavily sanitized character trapped in a network television script. She was a fiercely independent creator focusing heavily on the studio recording process and digital distribution. This massive, highly calculated pivot was not a sign of a fading career, but rather a brilliant, highly aggressive masterstroke of long-term career preservation that completely saved her artistic soul. As she aggressively dived deeper into the highly complex process of writing her own original music, her entire sonic identity underwent a massive, deeply profound maturation that completely shocked her initial critics. The incredibly frantic, highly explosive, and wildly uninhibited vocal style that initially defined her massive viral audition began to naturally evolve into something infinitely more controlled, deeply nuanced, and highly sophisticated. She did not completely abandon the raw, gritty rock and roll edge that originally made her famous, but she brilliantly began to masterfully weave in a diverse array of incredibly rich, completely unexpected musical influences. Saring Bertambanya Yuzia, she actively began exploring completely different genres, carefully blending the absolute best elements of modern alternative rock, deep emotional soul, and intricate blues into a highly distinctive, entirely fresh sonic tapestry. She actively refused to allow the highly predatory music industry to permanently categorize her or heavily restrict her immense vocal capabilities to a single, highly predictable genre. Her absolute willingness to bravely experiment with completely different sounds, deeply complex vocal arrangements, and entirely new rhythmic structures showcases a massive, deeply profound artistic maturity that completely belies her incredibly young age, proving she is far more than just a girl who sounds like Janis Joplin. The incredible, deeply profound evolution of Courtney Hadwin is not merely restricted to the complex sonic landscapes of her original music. It is also highly, visibly evident in the massive, deeply dedicated community of fans she has actively cultivated. By completely walking away from the highly toxic, fiercely manipulative grasp of the traditional mainstream television industry, she was entirely forced to construct her own massive platform entirely from scratch. She brilliantly recognized the absolute, undeniable power of the modern digital landscape and aggressively utilized massive platforms to cultivate a highly intimate, completely unfiltered relationship with her deeply dedicated global audience. Without massive corporate television executives constantly dictating her every single artistic move, she completely transformed her independent status into a highly lucrative, entirely self-sustaining digital empire. The millions of people who initially tuned in to simply watch a shocking, viral talent show moment have actually stayed to actively witness the breathtaking maturation of a truly serious, highly dedicated young musician. Her deeply loyal audience is no longer just passively watching her out of mere nostalgic curiosity. They are actively, fiercely supporting her entirely new original era. This incredible, highly organic transition from a fleeting viral television audience to a deeply dedicated, highly invested permanent fan base is the absolute ultimate victory for any independent recording artist. When we look back at the massive, incredibly complex trajectory of her career, it becomes absolutely, undeniably clear that Courtney Hadwin has achieved something completely impossible in the modern entertainment industry. She completely survived the highly toxic, deeply predatory meat grinder of the reality television machine, a ruthless corporate system that has completely destroyed countless other highly talented young children. She took the massive, incredibly volatile spark of overnight viral fame and brilliantly, meticulously fanned it into a sustainable, highly controlled, and fiercely independent artistic fire. The brand new Courtney Hadwin is a massive, completely undeniable testament to absolute, unshakable resilience and fierce artistic integrity. She successfully proved that you do not actually have to permanently sell your soul to the heavily manufactured corporate television industry to achieve lasting global relevance. She aggressively rewrote the entire rulebook, completely demanding that the entire world accept her not for the highly entertaining viral moment she was in the past, but for the brilliant, highly original singer-songwriter she is today. By fiercely protecting her absolute authenticity and bravery, releasing her own deeply personal original music, she has firmly secured her legacy, completely escaping the reality television curse, and forever cementing her ultimate status as a true, fiercely independent rock and roll powerhouse.